What's up, everyone? I'm the Kaiju no Kami with...
Admiring my nails. Krellica Kane.
And we are talking about Zenkaiger. Episode
40. Called Rescue My Father. One Chance.
AKA... I called it...
Okay. So somebody put in the comments for our last video that apparently they watched the episode super quick, because their comment for our last video was, "Wow, did you write the episode? You somehow knew the future." And this was before us watching it. And so he starts getting all depressed because he's like, I've been burned one too many times. I can honestly say if this was a relationship, you would have requested to be parted separate ways. And just that I'm done. There's no hope for the future. However, this is not a relationship. This is a Toku show. And right now, we're at episode 40. With the next series coming out early March, which we'll get to in a separate video, we only have between 8 to 9 episodes left of the series. And Isao, in this episode, I'm just going to spoil the ending because the point of it is way too quick. He's rescued. And how he's rescued is this like Deus Ex Machina type situation where they do It's a Wonderful Life. The only difference is we don't have a Clarence, and he didn't try to commit suicide because the bank was about to foreclose on his business. However, we hear about when he was born up until the point
he dropped his kid.
So, okay, let me just start with this. I know I lie about my age. I will continue to lie about my age until people stop believing my fake age. However, technically, based on this timeline, the character Visao is literally 6 months older than me. He was born in 1980, and apparently when he was like 13, because it was in 93, is when he decided to discover the parallel world theory. And his way of discovering it was to jump out of a second-story building. I don't know which is worse. The fact that when I was 13 in 1993, I started smoking. So let me weigh the options. Jumping out of a building or smoking. Obviously, we took two very different paths in life. Obviously, he's a fictional character. I know this. But still. And then he meets his future wife at 16, gets married to her at 19. Now, you can't comment on this because you got into our long-term relationship at 18. So you were super young. But it makes me wonder, during this timeline, because it doesn't sound like he had anything remarkable enough to create a technology in, let's say, an 8 to 10 year period that a intergalactic crime boss would want to steal. Did it give you any inclination of anything?
What are we talking about?
Isao.
Yeah, what about
There was nothing in their It's a Wonderful Life montage that really demonstrated what he and Mitsuko
created?
life, I am the same age as this character.
Okay, they said he discovered the parallel worlds and that they were going to do it, but yeah, they never really went into when they actually created it, how they actually created it. I don't even care about that.
Well, no, the reason why I point this out is because I'm not trying to dig on the dude's life. It's fictional.
It's all too short.
There wasn't anything to say. Like, his love story and how he got to the point of meeting his wife, having his child, that completely fine. That made sense. But for the purpose of the story, from what we got from episode 1 until now, of always having this photo and being talked to about how, like, intelligent and how advanced this couple were when they discovered the parallel world, when they created this Zenkaiger technology, I kind of expected more. I kind of expected him to maybe be a little bit older because he could be Doogie Housering it. I completely see he could have been like a savant as a kid.
I was surprised to find out he was only 40 because I expected him to be much older, and he looks much older.
Well, especially, yes, and that's my thing. It's like...
And the way they described him throughout the series is that they were much older. They discovered this stuff, and then they had a kid. That they were already established scientists.
And that's kind of my problem. And it's not to say at 40 years old, you can't accomplish great things. I've accomplished a shit ton of things at my age that I'm incredibly proud of. And so I know it's possible and there's nothing wrong with that. But there was nothing talked about in this montage that gave me the inclination of why they were so coveted by the Toji Tendo to the point where they created this miraculous weapon called Hakkaiser. And it makes me wonder, okay, what is it? And that's my frustration. And
it's clearly just more of Junko having no idea what to do with the concept she created.
Well, and so I wasn't going to bring Junko into it because at this point I think I've written off a plot. I still like the plot. I still like the story, or show, I mean. So don't take my criticisms as saying I don't like the show. The problem is really that they haven't given me anything to truly say why this happened and how we've come to this point. Why Ijiru stole these random two, and I'm going to call them randos because he stole these two people's abilities, but nothing in anything that has been presented this episode really gave that inclination. And what was the point of having Hakkaiser in Hakkaiyo if the mech can still be functional without a crew? And that's kind of what bothered me, because obviously for the mech that Kaito ran with the 4 Kikunoids, after he jets to go with two Kaiser,
they revert.
They revert back. But, and I understood they said it went berserk, but there was nothing to show.
That contradicts, because at the beginning of the episode, they show that Hakkaiser transformed into Hakkaijuo. So when did it become that it was a separate entity?
Well, and that was what confused me, because
this felt like it was a 2-parter crammed into one episode that had like all of its plot just cut out.
And it's like the idea. So with this particular episode, there were so many great ideas. Having Hakayo for Hakaiser become more like brainwashed, because when he was walking it past Stacy and calling him an imposter experiment,
not imposter experiment,
or incomplete or whatever it was, that was like a badass attitude, because he had the cape. I liked the changes.
That, and it was an exact opposite to how he was.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's like, why didn't we have that for Hakaiser throughout this entire time, where he actually felt like a threat?
Well, and he only was a threat, really.
What was the point?
For like 10 minutes.
What was the point?
Barely.
What was even the point of giving him this upgrade armor with a cool cape and not do anything with it?
Well, so we have that plot element. Having more of an evil Hakaiser alongside the Hakai duo, I really liked. I thought those could have been great elements to put into it, because they were a true threat that the Rangers have not had throughout the series. Then, having, like, if they wanted to do that storytelling, I'm not going to use It's a Wonderful Life anymore. I'll figure out another story where they do something like that. But when they did all of that, don't get me wrong, that was a kind of a cool way.
If that's all it took, though, to get Hakaiser to go back to being a Sao, they should have just done that, like, weeks ago.
Well, that's what I don't understand either. The other thing that I really liked is, like, a plot element they had in the episode is when Yak-chan finally finds out that Isao is Hakaiser. And she and Kaito start to make this difficult decision of saying, in a way, Zox, you were right. Because Zox did say episodes ago, you need to do something because it's going to get worse. And Zox kind of had that I told you so moment in this episode as well. And they made the difficult decision of saying, if we can't get him back, then we need to take that extreme response and do something. I thought that, obviously, they ruined it with the rest of the Kikunoids saying, but we should be part of this decision as well. And that's actually the one thing
they're not.
Well, that's the one thing I do disagree with. It's like, okay, Juron, maybe because he's like that uncle.
But it's not their call.
But that's exactly it. That's not. And I appreciate where they're trying to come from of like, your family is our family, like that Mikasa Sukasa, where everybody is.
You really have to do that.
Absolutely. Everybody is a part of that family. I understand where that's coming from. And I actually had a great conversation with Silverquill on something very similar, actually, earlier today. And I was talking to him earlier today while I was working. But, so we had kind of a similar-ass conversation of, you care about a person no matter what they do or don't do, but there are some times where you don't get to make that call. And it made me think of, in this episode, like my situation with my grandmother. Now, 21 years ago, because it was in
it's 20
years ago. 20 years ago, this time,
she was in the hospital.
I had to make the call because none of my family was comfortable enough to say, we need to pull the plug. And I had friends telling me, no, you should give it more time. You should give her a chance to recover. And it made me think of that because he admittedly was the voice of reason alongside with my family of saying, what is the right call? and nobody else gets to make that decision but the family. And I was the only family member comfortable with making that decision. But if the doctors or family or friends, so to speak, have said, no, don't do this, we're here for you, what does that... I love my friends, but what did that change? What would have that changed? And I kind of felt like that was a disingenuous thing of...
Well, they completely... It's another thing showing...
It kind of ruined the moment.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It goes again to show that Toei is too afraid to have a serious moment in a Sentai show. Because that is a really deep moment that they then had to ruin by having basically the comedy troupe come in and say, no, don't do that, and make a whole joke out of it.
Well, I don't feel like they were making a joke out of it.
Well, but it broke all the tension. It turned a serious scene into just another regular scene.
Well, yes, it did take away the tension, and my frustration is I have been a defender of saying for a long time that this is a kid's show. But I also have to remember, like, when thinking about other kids shows in America or even in Japan, I'm going to look at Detective Conan first. That's technically a kids show.
Mm-hmm.
And having watched a few of the movies, because I have not jumped into that series because, as he makes a joke, I have One Piece and JoJo's. I don't have time for another extremely long series. Except for Dragon Ball, because that's... But
Dragon Ball's even, like, not as long.
But with Detective Conan, even the few movies I have watched, for something that is targeted for a children's audience, holy hell! They don't pull punches. Now, they do keep it where you're not like, oh my god, you showed that to children type of thing. But they still kept that tension. And looking at other series, even in America, I'm thinking of like, okay, Ben 10. If you haven't seen Ben 10...
The original series.
The original.
And Alien Force.
Yeah. I don't know about the more recent stuff, but I know with the original series, and I was an adult watching it at that time too, but it had a lot of mature things. You could even use Kim Possible or so many other cartoon shows that are targeted towards children.
Gargoyles.
Well, I'm not using Gargoyles because that's been off the air for forever and a day, and that truthfully was still too mature for kids. I'm sorry. I am gonna lay down the gauntlet and say that show was not truthfully aimed to kids.
It was, though.
I know, but I will ride or die that show was not meant for children. But I still have to say, and when you look at the predecessors for Tokusatsu, or not Tokusatsu, but for Sentai, and I'm not looking at the 90s, because I am sick of having everything compared to the 90s. But when you even look at the 2000s, and I'm going to use Geki Ranger as an example, that had so many fun and ridiculous moments because you had John there. How could you not have ridiculousness when you have him as your main character?
But then you had the whole plot line with his father being one of the villains. And that was all done seriously.
And yeah, they still had the ridiculousness, but they didn't take you away from it. And I was thinking back on that because we've been watching a lot of classic, I say classic, but it's still Heisei, of Kamen Rider. And even that definitely is so much more serious. My God, Revise! You've seen our videos, or if you haven't, you better watch, because I'll be disappointed, I'll cry otherwise. But even with Revise, My God, that's a 2021 series. And the plots they're using, and yes, people can argue that Kamen Rider is the big brother of the Sentai, it's still aimed at kids.
Mm-hmm.
So this episode, while it wasn't the worst episode I've seen for Zenkaiger, and yes, there were other episodes I didn't like, I will say that this one actually disappointed me.
Well, the sad part is I went in expecting disappointment, and I was still disappointed.
Well, I think I was disappointed because I just feel like this was truly a slap in the face because you had so many excellent plot points that you could have in this episode, if they just nailed one of those plot points that they had set up, if you had nailed one of those plot points, I can guarantee you so many more people would be like, you know what? This was awesome because you're finally giving us our story. Because the only story element we got was at the end of the episode when Bokuwasu was pissed and Iago was like, and now it's time. Time for what?
Well, okay, so on that other note, also, here's some other things that we had a mech battle where they never even, with Hakaiju and the big form of the five Kikinoids,
Yes.
they never actually clashed with each
That's
other.
because the Zenkai mech was all CGI.
I know. What was the point of that? Because all they did was fire. Basically, it was Heisei Godzilla era again. They're just shooting things at each other. They're not actually fighting. And it's like, what was the point of even doing that if you weren't even going to actually have a mech battle?
Well, because Hakaiju, that mech was 100% real.
And
it was a beautifully designed
then
mech.
even when we have Hakaiju versus Kaiju, we've got that going on. We have the Kikinoids fighting Hakaiser. Why didn't they remember the Kira Major scene when you had red and yellow fighting the grunts, and you had the monster mech battle going on in the background. The sword crashes into the ground, and then everyone by the sword on the ground goes flying. They should have done a scene like that.
Well, and if you think about it, Kira Major was last year.
Oh my!
It's not like Kira Major was 10 years ago.
Kira Major showed how they should have advanced mech battles.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like Kira Major, for as recent as it is, was like a breath of fresh air for so many Toku fans because of the fact that it did something that many people have complained that has not been seen for years when it comes to Sentai. And this series being
was a step back.
Well, and I will still defend the series to say Zenkaiger has been a fun randomness type series. I still think of it as the Seinfeld of Sentai.
But yeah, we're 40 episodes in. This is, I guess, technically our first true plot advancement, and it was a rushed mess. It's like Kaiju should have been, or Hot Kaiju should have been introduced 2 episodes ago.
If not more.
So that they could have done this whole arc instead of just cramming it all into, hey, we gotta get him redeemed by the Christmas episode.
Well, and the other problem I have right now is when we saw the trailer for next week's episode.
Which is more filler.
And that's what I was going to say. It looked like a filler episode because we're doing the redux, so to speak. I don't know what the monster is, but we're just now we're officially doing the New Year's episode. And the challenge I have with it is it does look filler, but the one thing that was really confusing about the episode is every sign that they had. And I don't mean like sign like, oh my god, I see the sign. Like literal signs with kanji and katakana and romaji.
They were all blurred out.
They were all blurred out, so I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know if they were blurred out because they would have been a spoiler to what the episode truly involves. But it was a little confusing and a little jarring because if it is more plot, then obviously, yeah, you need to protect it. But why not show other scenes versus things that have to be blurred out for whatever reason? Right now, we are in the home stretch of this series. And for good, bad, or otherwise, no matter where you land on that sliding scale for the series, we're close to the end. So in approximately 2 months, we're going to be saying goodbye to this series.
Good riddance.
Or good riddance, depending on your perspective. But I will say, if this were to be the last episode I were to see of the series, it would be a shame. Because I was very disappointed by it.
Oh.
I would have rather stopped if I had to. I'm not stopping. But if I were to have stopped watching for whatever reason, last week would have been much better.
But, well, no, because last week left off in a cliffhanger.
You know what I mean.
But yeah, once again, we have this episode starts out with a mech battle, with the cliffhanger from the end, and then, transforms into Hakaio, and Ichiru just shows up. Yeah! Haha, this is Hakaiser's mech. Okay. I will say, the two scenes I did like in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Zox using Kiba Ranger's ability.
Okay. So, I have watched Die Ranger. I enjoyed Die Ranger. But I don't get that scene.
You don't remember his ability that he would then, like in one scene, one of the monsters, he summoned like a rock band to do like, basically it's just obnoxious noise that's giving the villain a headache.
Okay. Alright, now I get it. I was so flippin' confused.
But it was cool to see Byako Shinken. And then I did actually like them showing some...
Speaking of Byakushinken, Silvercurl just literally has that just chilling on his couch.
I should take it. And then I like the scene of actually showing the aftermath of Hakaiju O's destruction. Where you actually saw them taking people away in an ambulance and stuff.
Yeah, that was like the darkest I think the series truly got.
Well, no, we had Stacy's mom.
Yeah, that was... I was actually going to be really good and not bring up anything about Stacy or highlighting Stacy's mom.
I did like that Kaito figured when Zox said, an anonymous tip. He's like, it was Stacy.
Well, I think anybody, even a blind, deaf mute, could have figured out that it was Stacy.
But yeah, this episode was crap.
So, before we put too much effort into this, because we can go long in the tooth about it, we're going to call this episode good.
But it was bad.
I meant finished. Because we have more things to talk about soon.
You mean in the next video on Don Brothers?
Exactly.
Alright.
So, if you like what we do, please continue to like, subscribe, and post in the comments. Please do whatever YouTube has you do to support us, including any of those random notification tags, because we love being able to hear back from you and know that you enjoy what we do. Similarly, if you want to see more of our antics online, you can always find us at Kaiju no Kami on
Twitter, Facebook, Patreon,
Instagram,
Discord, and then the website creativitybydesignllc.com. And there's a store that you can buy cool merch at.
And we actually have other things on our website too, not just the store. You can watch all of our other videos. You can also see a lot of the interviews that we've had with celebrities.
Convention reviews, which we still have not done one for Komori-Con.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Good night. See you soon.